Hello, it's Joel again. Time for weeks 5 and 6 updates. Now in this video it's going to be slightly different to my other weekly updates, which I know were only 90 seconds. However, I thought after reflection that I should spend a bit more time because I had a bit of feedback that people want to know the details, the dirty details of all my symptoms and how I'm going and everything. So in this video it's going to be a bit longer, so be warned. So instead of listing out all the symptoms and energy levels I had and so forth, I thought it'd be better to play a game with you. And what's that game, you may ask? And the game is Symptom Bingo. Now, everyone loves playing games, so how do you play Symptom Bingo? I want you to think of possible symptoms I've had in weeks 5 and 6. I'll give you a cheat. There are 9 symptoms. And see if you can think of them, and I'm going to list them out now and then I'll jump back into the specific details of each one. So let's get going. First one, diarrhea. Spoken about it before. Some people think it's a symptom. It's kind of a way of life for me during weeks 5 and 6. So yeah, diarrhea is 1. 2, blood. Lots of blood. Tell you more about them soon. Weight loss. I hope maybe you thought of that. Hair loss, fatigue, that's probably a pretty common one which you may have thought of. Chemo Brain, how my brain works. Control of bowels, which is similar to diarrhea, so maybe that isn't a 9th, there isn't 9, maybe there's only 8. Now I've got a list over here what the other ones are. I should have thought of that one, pain. I think I'm trying to ignore that one. So that's 8. And then the last one is cramps. I should have mentioned that earlier. So that's a total of 9. As I mentioned, maybe it's only 8 because I've said control of bowels and is maybe similar to diarrhea. But they are different and I'll explain why. So let me jump in each one of them. So diarrhea, let me talk to you about my stools because I have no problem doing that. I'm so used to talking to doctors about this stuff now. So on average, I'd go 4 times a day. 1 would be semi-solid, 1 would be complete diarrhea, and the other 2 were in between diarrhea and semi-solid. So that was every single day. That's kind of was consistent actually from week 4 onwards, including 5 and 6. In relation to blood, so this can get a bit gory here, eh? So in relation to blood, obviously I had my internal side, so my lower rectum was all inflamed from all the radiation and it was bleeding. And what does that mean? It means when I sat on the toilet and went to the bathroom 4 times a day, drops of blood would literally just come out of my rectum and fall into the bowl. So that was on the inside. I like to use a basketball analogy, inside and outside game. My outside game was also bleeding. That started at of week 5. So my skin broke in week 5, which in all honesty isn't too bad because I was using a hand wash, a bidet hand wash. I wasn't wiping at all. Actually, from week 3, I wasn't wiping. I was using that hand wash, I think. So what that meant from blood in my outside game is that basically all around my butt, the radiation, because it works on the cellular level, it works from the below the skin level, but by the time it got to week 5, it had worked its way up to the skin level. So all my skin was cracked and bleeding around my butt. So I had blood on the outside so after I'd wash and use the hand bidet, when I patted it down to dry, there would be blood. And that was tough. So that wasn't so fun. In relation to the other things, in relation to weight loss, I lost roughly about 10 kilograms, about 9 to 10 kilograms of weight loss. And for someone who started out at about 88 kilograms would probably be my heaviest in the last, before all this is probably about my heaviest. So 88 kilograms in pounds is this much in pounds. If my editing team can add pounds there. If you're really good, you can also put in what that is in stone for my British viewers, but no one should ever use stone or pounds, but use a metric system, it works. But I lost about 9 to 10 kilograms. So right now I actually weigh 77 kilograms, which is kind of nuts. And I'll talk to more about diet in a future video, or maybe at the end of this one. So in relation to hair loss, I mentioned it wasn't that I was losing hair up here from the chemo and radiation, but I'll tell you a story about my hair up there another time. I was losing hair downstairs, and the actual doctor, my radiation doctor, before we started did say that I may get a free bikini wax. And I was like, ha ha ha, okay. But that wasn't kind of apparent until weeks 5 and 6, and still to this day, that I basically got no hair at my front, and it's a lot finer everywhere else around there, and also on my back. And maybe losing hair from my butt, I'm not too fussed about. But, and I know some people pay to get hair gone, lasered. I know I'm like pausing here, but it's just kind of weird because I'm picturing it in my head. So I miss my hair. Full bottom line, I miss. And it wasn't my choice to go get lasered from the laser hair clinic. It's just from the radiation machine, which I guess does it. The doctor said it may come back, so fingers crossed that it does come back. At the front at least, not too worried about the back. But yeah, that's hair loss. In relation to cramps, as I mentioned before, I used to get these 10-second cramps kind of at the top of my stomach area or my abdomen, and they were just like uncomfortable pain for about 10 seconds. They'd come, I'd probably get about 7 or 8 per day. No idea when they would come. They would just come, and honestly, it was not that bad. It's just like I'd stand there and be like, bloody cramp. So yeah, that was in relation to the cramps. In relation to the pain didn't change a lot from week 5 to week 6 in relation to going to the toilet. It's still horrible. Obviously, you can imagine, just like in my mind, I know I'm bleeding from my rectum. I know I'm bleeding from my outside. Just bloody sucks. So they did change my pain medication from a codeine-based medication to a narcotic. Yeah, interesting. Some people get, ooh, narcotic, legal narcotic. So they did change it to that. Is basically I went from taking 8 tablets of codeine a day to just 2 tablets. So when I woke up and when I went to bed, of this tiny little tablet, which was a narcotic, which is called oxycodone. So that was the name of it. It's kind of scary. I was going from these 8 tablets to this one little thing, which is like the size of like 2 ants together. It was tiny, and that would basically do the same amount in relation to pain levels. It was basically, I still had the same amount of pain as the codeine. It was just easier to manage because I only had to take them, as I mentioned, when I woke up and I went to bed. So pain sucks. There's so much in relation to pain. There's so much psychological fears and everything that happen because of all the blood and everything. So the pain factor sucked, and I'll talk more about the psychology and trauma about that later in the video. The other things I need to mention are things like Chemo Brain. So Chemo Brain's a real deal. What it is basically your brain slows down and you kind of know what's going on, but it doesn't really affect you. So what that looks like, and it's only until you're outside of that, and as you may know, I don't have any chemo bottle, baby. No chemo bottle, best thing. So Chemo Brain, basically, as I mentioned, your brain slows down and you just can't process a lot, and your world becomes a lot smaller. So now my brain's kind of switched on a bit more, and I can think and I can like problem solve and do things like that. I couldn't do any of that when I had the Chemo Brain. I could do puzzles because it was using the brain, but it's not like deep thinking of like network architectures and things like that. So Chemo Brain was a real deal, and I'm happy that I'm not on chemo and that's now gone, which is really good. The other things I haven't talked about, fatigue levels in 5 and 6 were the same from 4, 5 out of 10 energy levels. They honestly were pretty consistent across the board for this entire time, which is pretty good. Weight loss I spoke about, control of the bowels. So I think that's the last one here, which I haven't spoken about, controlling the bowels. So this is interesting. So basically I had a thing which I like to call TTL, and that's time to loo. So that was wherever I was, be it the 3 places I only went in weeks 5 and 6 were my house, the hospital, and maybe the park. At all those places, I knew exactly where the toilet was. And I'll explain why that's important, because TTL, time to loo. I had about 45 seconds, absolute maximum, where that feeling that you get when you need to go to the toilet, usually when you don't have all these symptoms, you get that feeling, oh, I need to go to the toilet, and you're like, okay, I'm in a meeting or I'm having lunch, I'll go after lunch. I'll go after lunch, I'll just wait. I didn't have that control. I had a 45-second maximum time that I needed to find a toilet and find that thing fast. So that means when I got that feeling to go to the toilet, I was out of that situation. If I was watching TV, I'd jump off the couch. My family would know what's going on. I'd literally jump off the couch, run downstairs and go to the toilet behind me. If I was at the hospital, I knew the distance to every cubicle around me. And so much so that my mind was all about distance to toilets. So if there was a new part of the hospital I was going to, because I was going every day, Monday to Friday for radiation, if there was a new part I had to go to for, maybe you had to go pay a bill, and I walked past the toilet and I didn't need to go, I would still go in there to see, one, if they had the stools or cubicles, so you could do a poop, not just the urinals, and if there was anyone in them. And that would basically, in my mind, I'd have like an asset management system of like, which toilets are where, do they have cubicles, how many, were they occupied or not, and I'd basically create a rating in my head of each toilet around the hospital. Obviously at home it's not too bad because I had my own toilet. I mentioned I went to the park every now and then. I used to go and shoot grandpa shots at the hoop with my chemo bottle. It was like, but it was good more for my mind. But that was a safe place for me, or I consider safe, because there was a toilet there, and I knew the distance to get from the toilet to the toilet from the basketball court was about 20 seconds. And I honestly, there were a few times when I was running to that toilet and I had a cubicle and I was good. So that was basically all my thinking for the weeks 5 and 6. If I wasn't distracting myself with a jigsaw puzzle, I was thinking about where the next toilet was, how am I going to get there, and is it free or not. So the controlling of the bowels was gnarly. I can now control my bowels, which is amazing. But I still have a lot of fears and trauma about that time, because I wouldn't want to go anywhere that I hadn't been before. So I wasn't going to go to the shopping center. I didn't know if they had toilets with cubicles which were free. I wasn't going to take that risk. So weeks 5 and 6, you have so much fear about going to the toilet and finding a toilet that it makes you become a bit of a hermit, and you stay at home, or you only go to those safe places. And that's really what happened for weeks 5 and 6. I didn't go out. Park, hospital, home. That's all I had. So that's kind of in depth of all my symptoms. The kind of crazy thing is that when you think of all of them, you're like, darn, man, Joel's going through a lot, or maybe like Joel's breezing through this. But honestly, I was going through a lot, and I'm still going through a bit now. But you have to think of the bright side, and in this weird way, maybe I had 9 symptoms, but realistically, there's 2 symptoms I didn't get. And I'm so happy I didn't get those symptoms. You have to kind of flip it around and be like, sure, I have symptoms, but what ones didn't I get? Because that's great. So the 2 symptoms which I got told about, which I didn't get, was nausea. I never really felt nausea during this whole time, and that's in relation to like just being a bit like, oh, I don't want to eat or anything. I actually had my appetite the whole time. I just didn't want to eat because it meant I had to go to the toilet more, not because I didn't feel like eating in that sense. So I didn't have nausea, which was great, and they gave me actually a huge amount of medication for nausea, but I didn't have to take any, which is fantastic. And then the other one was in relation to my bladder and peeing. So I didn't have any burning sensation when I had to pee. And I'm just so grateful for that, because I had so much, you could say, burning stuff happening in the other areas, my other side. So I didn't get that as well. And they actually gave me medication which for that. So it's actually quite common that you pee and it stings. I had that one time for like 2 seconds, and through this entire 6 weeks, and I'm just so grateful that I didn't have that one as well. So that probably would have made it up to 11 symptoms when I only got 9. So that's the way you have to look at these things. You're like, I only had 9, I didn't get 11 symptoms, life is good. So yeah, that's kind of how you have to take it. So the other things I did want to talk to you about were my diet, because I had a lot of questions from friends about what I have been eating. So I went to a nutritionist before this, and they basically put me on a diet called protein and low residue diet. That means any meats that I eat, I have to mince, or in America you say ground, so like ground beef, or we call it minced beef in Australia. UK is probably minced as well. So yeah, so I don't know, like things like chicken balls and so forth, it'll all be minced. So it just helps my body basically digest it. And it's important that I was eating some protein because I was losing so much weight, right? I'm 77 kilos now instead of 87 kilos. So it was important that I was eating that. And then the other thing in relation to low residue, things, I wasn't eating things with much fiber. Like I basically didn't want any more reason to go to the toilet. So fruits and fruits basically, or things high in fiber, I wasn't eating. And they actually told me to eat things high calories actually. So things you'd never think are healthy. They wanted me to eat just because they knew I was going to lose weight. So they just want to get as many calories or kilojoules into me as much as possible. The one thing I did love to eat during this entire time was a thing called Sayos. I think that's the brand. I'm not doing product placement. I just love Sayos because they help me so much. So basically they're just a dried wafer with like flour, salt, which are baked, and they're like a little dry biscuit. And I put butter and a bit of jam on them, and I just used to love eating them because they seemed to keep a little bit more in my stomach. It didn't make me go to the bathroom. So they were my favorite. The other thing which is interesting with a diet is you get cravings and non-cravings. So I had these crazy things where like I just was not doing any more chicken. Just done with chicken. And the other thing I was done with was strawberries. I can't explain it. Maybe the only thing I can relate it to maybe is like maybe you're a pregnant woman and you get these cravings for things and you're just like, I'm not eating that and I definitely want that now. I had those exact things. Basically, I was completely off chicken and strawberries, but then there's like these days where I was just like, I need watermelon. I just need watermelon. And even though I wasn't meant to eat it because of the fiber in it, I was just like, I have to have watermelon. So yeah, I went through these kind of crazy cravings, and they were just very interesting for me. So yeah, that was in relation to the diet. Now my stomach's good. I'm slowly introducing things into my diet again. I'm actually seeing the nutritionist in about a week, and we'll kind of build up my weight and everything again, starting from ground zero. So that was the only other thing. I did want to talk in the future video about trauma and fears. Tough stuff, man. A lot of this game's mental. So in relation to the trauma and fears, which I talk about here, the doctors actually talked a lot about trauma, about my bowels. And I should mention that I've now realized that through all of this, in relation to one of the things that I had was actually I did get a pile or a hemorrhoid during that time. I didn't realize it was that. I just felt a change downstairs, but I've now come to realize that that was most likely a hemorrhoid or pile from all the trauma of my bowels. And I actually got another thing which I still have, which is not so great. It's called an anal fissure. Yep, I'm talking about all this stuff. So an anal fissure is basically a cut in my bowels just behind my sphincter. This is your sphincter, this is your rectum. Your rectum is your sphincter. The sphincter is the muscle that it opens, which makes you go to the toilet. As I said, I have no problem talking about this stuff because it's been my life. So I actually have a cut inside there, got an anal fissure. Again, from all the trauma of my bowels, from basically 4.5 weeks of absolute pain and agony. So they've given me some stuff to apply to that, and that will hopefully increase the blood flow in that area and get rid of that anal fissure. But they do apparently take some time. So I don't know why that came up, but I did want to mention that. It was because of this, because of trauma, because some doctors talk about trauma of the bowels, the physical, but I want to talk about the trauma and the fears of up here, the mental game. And I mentioned I'll do this in a future video. I've been seeing a psychologist because, as I mentioned, a lot of this is physical, but a lot of it is very mental. And for those who maybe have a fear of flying, maybe claustrophobia, these are real fears. And I've had a fear of going to the bathroom, and I'm pretty sure you can understand why. Because I've had basically 6 weeks of association of pain and horribleness with going to the bathroom. So just as you get a fear of flying with sweaty palms, your heart starts to beat faster. All the physical changes from that fear is something that I get, and I've started to be able to manage them a lot better after seeing a psychologist. So I'll do a future video on that, because I do feel like as a cancer patient, you will at some point definitely need to see a psychologist if you can, because it's going to help you in one way or another. So yeah, looking forward to doing that video. Hopefully it'll be helpful for you, and I do want to thank you for tuning to this kind of long weekly update. Thanks for sticking around, I should say, and hopefully I'll get to see you again soon, and cheers for watching. Thank you. Bye.